Meowdy Y'all is the Cutting Corner podcast hosted by your resident cowboy Keo, where we talk about video editing tips, tricks, and tactics to stay up to date in the competitive content creation world. Today's guest is an incredibly talented capture artist and editor, Michael Zhang. Is that correct?
Zhang.
Zhang.
There's actually a lot of ways of pronouncing it.
Okay.
I've actually been looking into it recently, but the way I've always said it is Zhang.
Okay, Michael Zhang. Easy enough. I guess perhaps better known as Rydarus online, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's sort of been my gamer tag since I was like 12. So
okay.
Yeah, that's just like what I've always gone with.
I gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, I would say people know you for your incredibly talented work within Overwatch's whole scene since like 2020, I believe. And then you worked your way up from the collegiate scene to the actual Overwatch League, as well as your many other various polished frag movies that you've made over the last several years. So, Michael, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I really am looking forward to talking with you and just talking about editing and Overwatch and just anything in general. Yeah, so a little bit about me.
Sure.
I started editing when I was maybe like 16, but like that's like a strong way to put it. It's more like I had like iMovie and just sort of dicked around a little bit. So it wasn't really like I didn't actually like seriously start editing until like maybe like 2019 in film school, because I realized like I didn't like being on set in film school.
Sure.
I hated like sort of like the long hours and just having to work like 12-hour days on location and just having to do it for free because it's film school, no one gets paid.
So
I was like, nah, screw that. I'm just gonna sit in front of a computer and learn Premiere.
Okay, cool.
That's sort of how I started. But as far as Overwatch goes, yeah, I started in 2020 in Contenders, and I had done like little like Overwatch League frag movies before, but they weren't really like good. I was just like figuring stuff out.
Yeah, you're answering like all my questions already. I was like, wow, oh my god, so much information all at once.
Yeah. I can talk forever.
Okay, awesome, good.
I started editing Overwatch League frag videos when they did like, I don't know if you remember, like they did the May Melee contest in 2020. It was like the 3000.
I thought about joining that. Yes.
Yeah. So that was like the first frag video I ever edited, and it was not good. It was not good at all. But I was like, oh, I actually kind of like doing this. So I kept working at it and just sort of figuring it out like that 2020 season. Okay. And then once that season ended, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try and join a Contenders team. So that's sort of how that started.
Okay, that's really cool. Well, I guess I can maybe zoom out a bit of this particular conversation and we'll look at a bigger scope for just a moment. I really think that your movies speak for themselves when people watch them, that like there's clearly a level of passion put into your work that stands out from like, you know, the run-of-the-mill frag videos produced at like the hobbyist level. And you've clearly worked hard enough to be in a position to make these professionally now. Where exactly does that passion stem from? Like, can you pinpoint an exact moment in time that you knew you wanted to do it for work?
For me, the biggest thing is I'm a very like tangentially hyperfixated person. So I'll kind of hop from thing to thing and just get really focused on things. Like I like to think that I like one trick everything I do. So like in Overwatch, I'm a Genji one trick and I can't play anything else. When it comes to frag movies, I think the really big thing was that I would see frag movies and I was like, oh, I really enjoyed that. But I definitely would do it differently. And that's sort of been my genesis, is I had enough times where I was like, if I were to do that, I would do it differently. Where I was like, why am I just sitting on my ass and not doing it when I
could
feel
just
like
do
I
it
totally could if I like learned the skills. Yeah. And also for me, I don't know. It's always, I don't know if that answers any of the question, but for me in terms of the passion of it,
sure.
When it comes down to passion for me, like I come from, like I was a child actor as a kid. I was never very good, but I was a child actor. But one of the things for me was just struggling for like Asian representation in general. And when I was a kid, it was like much worse than it is now. And one of the things that sort of drew me to Overwatch is in terms of Asian representation. There's an abundance of it and never really had to worry about it. So for me, it was always like, Overwatch was sort of like a comfort thing, where it's like I could see a lot of people that looked like me and never had to worry about it. Whereas in other forms of media, like sometimes the depictions just weren't that great, or maybe there wasn't a lot of it. And it was just like, it always felt like an uphill battle, whereas in Overwatch it was like you could take it for granted almost. So it was like, you know, for me it was just sort of natural. Like I wish I could say it was like super like storybook, like it had to happen this way.
No,
but
I get it.
It was more like a long string of happy accidents.
Okay, so it really just went from a casual enjoyment of the game to, hey, I really like the way that this was produced when I watched it, but I would have done it this way. And then you had that thought repeatedly to the point where you said, okay, I think I'm actually going to sit down, teach myself how to do this, and actually go about doing it differently.
Yeah, I also think that for me, I know a lot of like frag movie editors get really inspired by frag movies. I'm not that person. Like I rarely watch frag movies nowadays. Like I had like a frag movie phase. I think every like frag movie editor sort of has like different phases where they get really obsessed with specific editors. I don't think I really had that, but I had like a little bit of a frag movie phase where I looked at other frag movies. But I think in terms of like inspirations for me, like one of the things that in college that I was like when I was starting to learn how to edit, I was looking at movie trailers a lot, and I was like, oh, maybe I want to be a trailer editor.
Yes.
Yeah, that never quite stuck exactly the right way, because it was like close to what I wanted to do, but it wasn't quite there, because I don't know if you know anything about trailer editors and the trailer
I wish I did.
industry in general, but it's a very, very competitive industry. Like, for example, Marvel movies, most of the trailers for Marvel movies are actually usually not edited by one company. Usually multiple companies, like multiple trailer houses, will edit different trailers, and they'll all compete for the spot to edit a Marvel movie trailer. And usually what happens is Marvel will like see those different cuts, and they'll pick and choose the bits they like, and they'll kind of Frankenstein it. So the end product is usually the product of multiple different companies. Like there's some exceptions. I think the Doctor Strange trailer was actually edited by basically one editor and one trailer house, but the vast majority of like big budget superhero movie trailer, Marvel movie-esque trailers are definitely like almost edited by committee. And that aspect of
so strange.
Yeah.
Okay, from an outside perspective, I guess, because I always assumed it was in-house.
I think it is strange. But I mean, I guess that's the nature of like the beast. So I was definitely like, when I was looking at that, I was like the things I work on, I'm very particular about them, and I like I'm a bit of a control freak in that way, especially when it's like something like really personal. Like when it comes to the Overwatch League itself, like working for the Overwatch League, it's much easier to let go of that and just focus on helping my editors and helping other people who have to use the things that I make in their edits to sort of relax and trust people do that. But when it comes to, especially when I was in college, I was like not really ready for that. And when it came to looking at trailer editing, I was always like, oh, that sounds like so much like compromising. And that didn't really appeal to me. So when it came to frag movies, I sort of became passionate about it because I saw it as like enough of like a malleable medium that you could just take the label and do whatever you want with it, and as long as it met like very specific like criteria, like loose criteria, but like specific things that were included into it, you could kind of do whatever you wanted.
Get away with whatever, right?
Yeah. You can get away with a lot of leeway. So I sort of just looked at it and was like, what did I like about trailer editing and what did I not like? And then how could I bring that to a different medium and sort of make the thing that I wanted to make? So that's sort of how I fell into that, if that makes sense.
Right. So so that eventually spilled over into your discovery of the replay viewer and learning to use it and saying, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I can use my education for this actually in a practical way. And then you went about it like that, presumably?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think in terms of, it's funny because when I started, I was always like, well, I'm not like a great like cinematographer in like real life. So I always thought when I was first starting out that I would carry myself with editing and sort of band-aid over the things in the replay viewer that I didn't like really know about. But nowadays I actually consider it the other way around, where I think my strongest skill set is the replay viewer. And my editing, I sort of just let my knowledge of the replay viewer carry me. And then when it comes to like raw editing, I'm like not necessarily disinterested in editing, but editing is like definitely like a sort of supporting player to me. Like I try to do like only what I feel is necessary, because for me editing is like less is more, and I'd rather take the hours that I spend and invest them more in working with the replay viewer and less like sitting in the edit bay and like agonizing about like every little
detail,
individual pixel. But also, and we can talk about this in a bit, like I think I have a lot of feelings about editing that maybe a lot of people don't, or maybe they're
some hot takes.
Weird.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I definitely understand why you think being a capture artist would slowly kind of take over in your primary interest. And I feel like a major reason might be because what you capture is what you have to mold and work with in the editing bay, versus the editing bay where you have to take what someone else, captured for you or filmed for you or whatever the case might be, and work within those means. Whereas when you're capturing it yourself, you have full creative freedom as to the scope of what you want to create as a whole, if that makes sense. Whereas editing, you already kind of start in a box, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely think that does. I think it's also like, so the things that I like about editing are very like macro based. Like when I think of editing, the things that interest me the least are sitting with a singular clip and like slowly messing with it to give it like a look. So like in terms of like that's why I've never been interested in like being a colorist or like a motion designer. Not really. Like at times I've like dabbled into it, but like it's only like to do what's necessary. In terms of like I know there's a lot of editors that spend a lot of time giving particular clips a look or giving like a particular motion. That's never been something I've been super interested in when it comes to editing. The thing that really excites me about editing is almost like when you zoom out and look at the entire macro view of a video and determining what pieces go in and what pieces go out and in what order, like ordering things. Yeah, it's not just like it is storytelling, but it's like
boarding it together.
It is storytelling. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of hard to explain. So like the way I equate it is like when you edit like something that's really long, like a film. It's not, at that point, it's not really about like the technical skill of it is not important, because the technical skill of it is simple. It's like Legos, like you're putting things in order, and you're just you're stringing them together, right? Like the technicals of it aren't hard. Like you could explain like a 10-year-old, like, okay, you press this button and you cut, and then you put this next to that and you drag it and you're done. Yeah, it's super simple. But that's not what makes it hard, right? What makes it hard to me is you have to zoom out and like look at the entire thing and go, does this shit make sense?
Right, having the eye for it.
In order. And that's the part that excites me, is looking at the entire thing and going, does this flow and does it make sense? Like those, and like, it's kind of like cooking to me. Like, I don't want to cook like each individual ingredient and like spend like 30 hours like on each individual ingredient so it's perfect. I want to like have all the stuff and just throw things in the pot in different orders and figure out like how to weave it together. And like sort of do the cooking that way. Like I'm very much like I want to have everything laid out and like season and like do different things, but I definitely don't want to be like obsessing over every single micro detail just to say I obsessed over every micro detail. I don't know if that makes any sense, because I do obsess about micro details, but it's definitely on the capture side and the sound side. But in terms of like a like very like constructed edit, that's not super me.
Yeah, it sounds like you like the idea of directing and producing more so than, like you said, the micro things in a production. Whether or not, you can incorporate direction and production in your projects is another thing entirely, but you try to look at it from that lens when you're handed a project. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. In terms of like what I have very different mindsets also when it comes to like doing something for my own YouTube versus doing something for Owl. When it comes to Owl, like my biggest thing, when you work in like with like a group of people, you kind of have to let the ego out and just not worry about that.
Yeah.
You have to be chill.
Of
You know,
course.
so for me, working with Owl is like I just want to be the most helpful person possible, especially
Mhm.
since like because I'm not super interested in like the nitty gritty editor stuff, like the motion graphics and stuff. I don't really mind being an assistant editor because that's that part of like getting things ready for other people and like pulling clips and pulling different voice lines and doing all of that stuff that maybe would be like boring for most people if you're like really fixated on being like a rock star editor. But for me, it's like
Sure.
very almost like zen and relaxing.
Mhm.
Just like you're kind of like I keep going back to food analogies because I'm a giant foodie, but you're kind of
No,
like
go
a
for
sous
it. Yeah.
chef. Yeah,
Sure.
I
Sous chef.
enjoy
Sous
being the
chef.
sous chef in that way. And in terms of like at work, where my like creativity quote unquote comes in is really comes down to capture, because for capture, at least in Overwatch,
Mhm.
you really don't have multiple people working on it. You really just have one person doing it, and even the editor doesn't have that much control over what you do capture. I mean, they can give you requests and stuff, and
Sure.
also like the editors at Owl are generally pretty chill, and they'll often like ask me for like how would I shoot things, and they generally just take whatever I give them.
Mhm.
And it's pretty chill. So that's where I really let like the creative side of me flex. But when it comes to it being AE, and I think it's important to put yourself in the shoes of someone else and just kind of have empathy and be like, okay, if I were editing this, what would literally make me editing like the most relaxing and pain-free process possible? Because
Right.
there's nothing worse as an editor than doing something and then realize, oh, I need this VOD that I don't have, and I need to download this, and I need to stop down and stop editing and stop like being
Right.
in
Getting out
that
of the flow is
flow.
the worst.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
getting out of the flow and just doing something random. And to me, I really like enjoy getting things ready for people so they can have like the most smooth experience possible
Optimal
in that
flow.
way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. Before we get into anything further with the technical side of things, with camera work and stuff like that, I wanted to go ahead and get the most boring question I had out of the way. I apologize, but I figured it'd be beneficial to ask. I believe you're my first guest with Avid experience. Could you possibly summarize the biggest differences between software like that and more commonly worked with programs in our space, like, Premiere, DaVinci, Final Cut?
So I'm gonna preface this by saying I've had formal training on Avid, but like I have not used Avid in like 2 years, and I
That's
hated
totally fine.
every second of using Avid, so I never really like seriously learned it. That
What
being
what
said,
what
I
was
think
the typical use case? Because I still struggle to figure out when people use Avid. Everyone says that it's, like a professional standard, a lot of industries use it, but I don't know anyone personally that uses Avid on the day-to-day. I know that people learn it, in college and university,
yeah.
but, for a job, I'm unaware.
So, in terms of Premiere versus Avid, for me in university, I learned Avid. I never took a single class on Premiere. I was entirely self taught on Premiere. I think for most people, the transition from Avid to Premiere is much easier than Premiere to Avid. Avid is really like anal about like project setup and things like that. But if you know Avid and you know how to set up a project in Avid, setting up a project anywhere like in any other program is like miles easier.
Okay.
In terms of like the differences between the two, so first of all, like where people use it, Avid is way better than Premiere when it comes to long form projects. I think anything better than like not better, anything longer than like 20-25 minutes, from what I understand, is like the performance of Avid is just much better than Premiere. Like I'm sure
Uh,
you've had like bloated Premiere projects that take forever to load. Like
sure.
Coda was
That's why I
like
use
2
proxies.
terabytes and it was like 5 minutes long
Mhm.
total, but like the entire like all of the clips and everything in the project that was just in it was like 2 terabytes, and it would take like 5 to 10 minutes just to boot that
Mhm.
project up on an SSD. Like the entire project was on an SSD, and like that kind of problem I think is very not unique to Premiere, but that's definitely more of a Premiere problem. And once from what I've heard from editors that have worked on both, once you start building projects out long enough to the point that you need that macro view, Avid is just much better at handling that macro view.
Okay.
I also think a lot of it is just like inertia. Like at the end of the day, it's what the boomers use, and the boomers have money. So
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
yeah.
That makes sense. Need to funnel some of that money into performance stabilization, things like that on Premiere side. Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, Avid's kind of weird. I don't know. Have you ever used Avid?
I've never had the opportunity to know. I was going to attend an editing college, just didn't work out. and they were going to teach Avid, but I never had the chance. So I was always curious.
Avid is odd because I think it is more stable than Premiere if you have a system that works for Avid. But Avid's strange, especially for Windows, because if you don't have like very particular specs or like builds, that program just won't work. Like you
Right.
like Premiere, you can be like, oh, I'll get this GPU, I'll get this CPU, I'll get this mobile. Like you can build the gaming computer and then use Avid, and then use Premiere. Like that's not
Right.
a problem.
Right.
Whereas for Avid, if you did that, there's a good chance that Avid will just not function. Like if you don't have parts or like pieces of your computer that like are approved to work in that combination by like Avid the company. So yeah, Avid's just odd like that.
Huh. Wow. No, I never knew that. That's interesting. Okay. Well, cool. Now I have a bit of a better understanding as to the use case scenario for Avid and the differences like that. Okay. Yeah, I never knew.
Actually, I have an Avid story.
Oh yeah, go for it, please.
I think about. I remember. So this was in my last year of college. It was like a post production, like an advanced post production class. I think this was when I was on Susano, which was my first and only contenders team actually. It was like October 2020. And our final project for the semester was that we were supposed to just edit something. It didn't matter what it was, but it was like, it could be like a short film that we've already made. It could be really anything. So I wanted to make a frag movie. I didn't end up doing it on Avid for a few reasons, but I was like, how could I make my schoolwork my real work? Like I was like trying to find little ways to optimize like my time that way. Cause like that class was like a drag and the professor was great, but there was like a ton of work with that class.
Okay.
That was just like insane. So I was like looking not to cut corners, but I was like, oh, can I like make things easier on myself in that? So I was asking the professor about Avid and mixed frame rates because for us, we could use like a lot of things that we do. Like not everything is always going to be the same frame rate. Like sometimes you're going to have different things and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my Avid professor was like, why would you ever want mixed frame rates? And she was like, yeah, it's basically like it's possible, but it's like terrible. Like it's really not designed for that.
Right there.
And I was just like dumbfounded because like in Premiere it's like, oh well, just
of course you can mix frame rates.
But in Avid it's like an entire thing.
It's an ordeal. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's just the things that program is just designed for and it's good at is just completely different from our realm of zoomerism.
Okay, gotcha.
Like they're wholly incompatible for the most part.
Well, that's fascinating. I've always wanted to learn just, even surface level a bit more about Avid. So that's a really nice peek into the window of it. I appreciate your insight on that. I guess we can curve back to your content that you've worked on, of course. So I think taking just like one listen to your videos without visuals, right? It's obvious that you're meticulous about your audio design in your frag movies and such. Did having an educational background that required you to learn sound mixing for projects and stuff help at all? Or was like learning audio design for your movie specifically like on the fly in your case?
Yes and no. So at Loyola Marymount University, the film school I went to, we were required to take like a sound, like multiple recording arts sound classes, but most film production students in any, like even like the top universities, like if you talk to USC students or like NYU students or whatever, like big film school, like most people like sound is not like the fucking like sexiest thing.
No, of course.
Yeah, it's not.
Course.
Like people usually don't put that much effort into it. Like if people want to be directors or like cinematographers or even editors, like the amount of effort they put in their sound design like is not that high because they can get other people to do it,
Sure.
So for me, the big thing was in my junior year, I had to do like a thesis film that was like a 7-minute short film, no dialogue, very normal like film student assignment. But the big thing was we were not allowed to record sound on set. We had to do all the sound in post. And most students get one of the recording arts majors who are very scarce at our school. So like the ratio of like film production students to recording arts majors is like 4-1 at LMU. And every year of like film production students is only like 80 or something. So like it's not, there really were not many recording arts majors, and like everyone's trying to fight for like the 20 or so people that are recording arts majors to be like, can you score and sound design my film? And I knew a few, but they were all busy. And I was like, I'll fucking learn how to do it. So I spent so I basically just did all of the sound of my film myself, except for the music. I got some music students to do my music. But for like the sound effects and everything, I did all my own Foley. I recorded everything and I mixed it myself. And like it was actually like not bad. Like it was actually the thing I was like most proud of at the end was that I just did all my own sound, and then like there would be like other films at school, and I'd be like, my sound is like basically as good as theirs, and they majored in this stuff, and I learned how to do this in a month. So I was gonna say,
is that why you were most proud of it? Because
that was the thing I was proud of, because like when I was in film school, like I know this maybe doesn't make sense if you look at my frag movies, because my frag movies are very like serious and epic and gamery. My film school stuff, like I was not a slacker in film school, but I made like a mean trash in film school. Like I did not, I was not like, because like at film school, like the cliche genre is like horror or like really like melodramatic stuff. I was not that. I made meme trash. So like I was not like a big like, oh, we need like the perfect shots, we need the perfect everything. That was never me in film school. But sound was like a thing that I like always like that was like like, even though I didn't know how to do it, like
you appreciated it.
There's like a saying, like you can forgive like bad visuals, but bad sound will like is like a migraine. Like it'll just like stab you in the face.
Yes.
Especially since like it's harder to articulate, right? Like you can hear bad sound and not understand what's wrong with the video, but you'll feel it. Whereas like if it's like a bad visual, it can be kind of kitschy. It can be kind of like fun or like have like an aesthetic or something.
Sure.
It's just like a different level of tolerance.
Right. The only context in which bad audio is good is like maybe, an XQC stream. But even then,
yeah, for sure. As far as like sound design of like the actual frag movies goes, I think it definitely for me comes back down to like trailer sound design. I think Overwatch, like one of its biggest strong suits is the sound mixing. So for me, like I don't want to fuck with that. Like I know people sometimes they like to like take sounds from other games just for fun, or like they'll take kill feeds from other games, and that's cool, but that's not me. So for me, the Overwatch like sound design is great. So if anything, most of the time I'll like isolate sounds. Like I think the full sound mix is like a lot, but I'll usually like isolate sounds and record them on their own and replace them, which is pretty standard. I think the big thing for me is like trailer sound effects. Like I love trailer sound effects, like risers, downers, booms, whooshes, stutters, like stuff like that. That's sort of like where I spend the most time in terms of sound design, and just balancing like in terms of sound mixing. There's like a saying where like you have like three things, right? You have like dialogue, so in this case it would be like casters, blah blah blah, sound effects, and then you have music. And you can't really have all three going full tilt at once, otherwise it doesn't really make sense. You can really only have two or like one. Generally, I try to sort of learn like different planes of mixing as you work on your sound mixing. So for me, part of like learning how to sound mix for these frag movies is like when you have wall-to-wall music and wall-to-wall dialogue and wall-to-wall sound effects, how to like balance like which ones are important. For me, it's usually the music is somewhat a constant. Sure. And then the dialogue and sound effects will just sort of do like a little dance where like the gaps in dialogue will have sound effects and the gaps in sound effects will have dialogue. So it's sort of like bouncing in between those and just doing the little dance and just trying to cram everything in there snugly without having it be completely nonsensical. So that's sort of my sound mixing philosophy. And it's not complicated in terms of like technical skill.
No, sure.
It's more so figuring out the balance of it all. Like most of the things I do, if I talk about them, for me, I like to think of like these things as like a magic trick. To me, you know how like when you know how a magic trick gets done is like it loses the magic.
Yeah.
That was a big part of actually going back to like looking at frag movies is I don't really get impressed when something has a trick to it.
Sure.
Or like that's not the thing I care about. I don't really get fixated on things where it's like, oh, it's a secret. I like things where it's like, it's simple, it's just really hard. Like anything that's straightforward, I'm like, I could totally see how you could do that, but I could never do that because it's hard. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
It's like the difference between a magic trick and actually doing magic. Like to me, I'm always hunting for like actually doing magic.
Right.
instead of here's this illusion that has a hook or a little thing that you have to learn how to do, but once you can do that, the illusion is easy. For me, I'm looking for how do I jump 20 feet away instead of look like I'm doing jumping 20 feet away. That's how I always look at it.
I gotcha. Yeah. And then
Those are the
on
things that like really interest me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think on top of that, like a good magic trick, you see it once, you're really impressed, and no questions asked. You kind of just enjoyed it for what it was. And I think that kind of correlates as well. But yeah, when I was initially discovering your resume and your plethora of frag films, if you will, I really, really enjoyed the way that you balanced everything because I suppose the best way I could describe it is that it's nuanced in the sense that there is a delicate balance between, like you said, sound effects, talking heads, of course, and the music. And I guess, for example, unfortunately, I can't show it or showcase it on the podcast because, um,
DMCA.
yeah, well, not only DMCA, but music plus podcast be a little funky. But yeah, if we take, for example, the Gangster's Paradise frag film, I really appreciated the way that you let the commentators hype up the scene that they're commentating without the sound effects boiling over them, so to speak. And when there isn't commentary and there are sound effects being used, the commentary comes immediately after, and you can notice that the sound effects are starting to taper off slowly in volume versus the commentary, which is of course rising and stuff like that. So like you said, it's a dance. It's you never have all of them at full blast at once. It wouldn't sound good. But a good frag video, you don't notice those little things. You know what I mean? It's just like a second thought. It's an afterthought. So yeah, no, I definitely think people can appreciate those little things, especially once you say like, oh yeah, like I have to deal with the full volume of the game, the music balancing, and of course the commentary on top of all of that. And when you're taking that from many different sources, many different matches and stuff like that, it becomes a huge management crisis of oh god, how many bins do I have in this project now? It's a lot. So your type of work that you do is definitely admirable. I'll say that much.
Thank you. I appreciate it all.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, most YouTube editors that have like filmography under their belt, like the experience ends at like small scale things like interviews, talking head stuff, maybe B-roll. But working with a unique system like a video games replay viewer, how different is it from operating something like a physical camera, would you say? Because you have a unique experience in having worked with both.
So I will say, like, in terms of like my IRL cinematography, I did do some like first day seeing and like cam mopping on sets at film school, but I was never like good at it. Like, I think first of all, I didn't enjoy working on set. Second of all, I think the worlds are compatible, quote unquote, in that if you have a good eye, like a visual eye, they will translate. But in terms of like the actual mechanics of like real life, like holding a camera, there's virtually no crossover from my end. Like, I think in terms of improving as a capture artist and improving in the replay viewer, I think the biggest thing for me is, again, like getting inspiration from a diverse sort of smorgasbord of sources. Like, I think watching cinematography is almost more useful than doing like videography, especially if it's like interviews and stuff. Like, there's really like not a lot of crossover. Not to disparage like doing B-roll and doing interviews and stuff, because that stuff is like super important. Like that stuff is where we as like assistant editors and like where we as like people working in esports, like that's where we build the storylines and stuff. It's just a very different skill set. And I definitely I think the crossover is there, but it's not really in the actual action of doing it. It's more in developing your visual eye and sort of developing your ability to look at a shot and go, why do I like that shot? Why don't I like that shot? So
right.
Yeah, I think that has more to do with it than anything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I was mostly asking what makes it different, and I think you nailed it on the head as far as the small things that they do share, but a large majority of, like you said, the mechanics of moving around a virtual camera. and operating in the viewer are incredibly different from lugging around a physical camera and operating it as such. So
I
that
will
makes sense.
say, if like the replay viewer let you light things, or like in terms of like looking for good lighting in general, there's definitely correlation there. I also think like just like lens sizes. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
shoot things in real life and you know like what lens looks good in a close up and what lens looks good in like fucking a wide, and you're just like,
right,
oh, I
right,
would
right.
use a 50 here, I would use a 35 here, I'd use like a zoom lens here. Like things like that will translate. It won't be exact because like the Overwatch replay viewer doesn't say like lens
Operate like that.
sizes, so
Right,
it's
right,
like
right,
it's just like FOV. You press this button, it go up. You press this button, it go down.
right.
But I mean, it's still useful. And like if you ever do things like Blender, like I don't
Mhm, mhm.
mess with Blender much, but like I know in Blender, I think the default way of measuring FOV is actually like physical lens sizes. So like
Yes, yes, it is.
things like that totally translate. So it does translate. It's just like it's very not indirect, but it's like the things are there. It's just not the whole pie. It's like little
Sure.
pieces here and there that are very useful, but you still gotta like grow the rest of it.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think also on top of all that, with frag movies, the highlight or the takeaway of the video is like, the pop off and the skill showcase, right? But in your case, you're often having to balance those with storytelling as well. Does your minor in screenwriting come into play more than you expected going into the
Oh
job?
shoot, you know about my minor in screenwriting? Who the fuck told you about that?
We have
Where'd
to
you
know.
dig
You're
that up?
Michael.
I'm gonna be honest. I haven't really thought about that. It makes
Sure.
sense. I think it makes for a good story, if you will, to say yes. And I've definitely used my screenwriting minor since I graduated, but I
Mhm.
don't. I think in terms of storytelling, I think it does it does matter. Like there's that saying that you hear a lot in like film school where they'll go like, oh, the screenwriter is like the first editor and the editor is the last
Yeah,
screenwriter,
yeah.
and it is very true. So I think yes,
Mhm.
but not in like a, oh, I'm constantly drawing upon it. It's just
Right,
like a
right, right.
reminder, like focus on the macro. And it goes back to like what I was saying, like what I enjoy
The
about
bigger
editing is
picture,
zooming
yeah.
out into the macro and going like,
Yeah.
in what order do we put these so that the story makes sense?
No, that
Like
makes so much sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, I was just curious. To answer your question, it was just on your resume. And
Gotcha.
I no, I didn't reach out and
No,
to someone behind
I
your
figured, but
back.
I was like, where did you find? I don't know. Is my resume like floating around publicly? I don't
Yeah, it
know.
is.
It might be on LinkedIn, I guess.
No, it is publicly. I'll talk to you about it later. But that
Gotcha.
being
I mean, it's
said,
fine. Like you don't have to delete it. I was just curious.
okay,
Like,
okay. Yeah, no, I was just super curious because I figured that a minor in screenwriting would eventually, even if it was just like subconsciously, come into play eventually.
yeah,
You know what I
I
mean?
think
Like,
that's accurate.
okay, cool,
I
cool.
think I think the most impactful thing when it comes to storytelling is I think what makes frag movie editing hard for people to do it in a storytelling sense is not because they don't want to do it. I don't think that's really the case because like I think you can actually see this like in Gangster's Paradise. Like it's funny you brought that edit up because I don't really consider the storytelling in the edit to be actually all that coherent. Like it is mostly just hype plays. Like
Sure, yeah, it's
there
just a season
are
four. Yeah,
emotional moments, but like the story itself is not that cohesive. Whereas I think some of the contenders edits and Coda is in
much more
particular
so. Yeah,
is much more, yeah, the story is much more put together and it definitely flows. And I like there is like the story there is the focus, right?
right.
And for me, those are only possible if you literally not only watch all of the matches, but like log all of the matches start to finish. And
Yeah.
you like, for example, Coda, we had a like that the media log that I made for Coda for that was just me and Laura Marcus, who was our post-production assistant, who helped me log the entire broadcast. We had like 450 plays with voice lines logged there with time code. So
Okay.
we could copy paste time codes into the YouTube match VODs that we ripped from YouTube and then immediately find the caster voice line and the play linked to it.
Mhm.
And then sort of from there, like having those 450, we whittled it down to, I want to say about 75 plays and voice lines total.
Mhm.
Because generally for like a 2-minute frag movie, I shoot about like 25-ish scenes, maybe 30, and I'll whittle it down to like 20 or 25, give or take. So since Coda was like 5 minutes, but there was some like CG stuff from Callow and like some like older plays, it ended up being around like 67 to 70. And just doing that work of like getting the macro, like you can't have a macro view on anything unless you have a macro view of the entire fucking playoffs week, whatever.
Right,
right?
yeah, especially
it's
in
just not
esports.
possible.
Yeah,
So
no.
like a lot of it is the degree, but I think most of it is just having the time, energy, and liking Overwatch enough to want to watch all of that
The
and not just
patience,
watch the plays
yeah.
and be like, oh, I like watching this, but
Yeah.
also be like, I should write down everything, every part of this that I liked down to the minute, and then figure out what parts I actually do like, and then put them in an order that makes sense, and then put them in the video, and then figure out if the music lines up, and then if it doesn't, what parts can I do to fix that?
Exactly,
And then how
yeah.
can I remix this? It's like you're building like a Lego set, but you need to get the Legos, and then you need to make sure all the pieces fit together, and then you need to
Right.
make sure they're in the right order, and then you need to make sure they fit them in the display case you're gonna put them in. Like that.
Right,
It's
right,
just
right.
kind of a giant balancing thing.
A giant balancing act, right? Man, yeah, I can imagine that as a replay viewer, capture artist, you have much more going through your head when you're watching the matches themselves than just, oh, that was a really cool play. You said, okay, well, if I want to get a good shot of that, I'm going to need to capture from this specific corner. And, you know, if I want the lighting to look decent, I'm going to need to be at this angle and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like there's so much more that you have to keep in mind when your job is to literally make content revolving around the things that happen live.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's just fascinating to me because it is such a new medium of entertainment in the sense that your job would not have existed, you know, 10 years
even
ago.
like 5 years ago.
Maybe
Yeah.
even 5. Yeah, it's just mind-blowing. It's on the cusp of cutting edge entertainment, and I just think it's really cool, and that's you know, one of the major parts as to why I wanted to bring you on the show is because it's such an interesting way to think about content that we digest in a live setting and then bringing it over to content to digest, you know, outside of that live setting. Yours is a much more produced video than, say, you know, a Twitch highlight edit. Not to undermine Twitch highlight edits that I've done for I don't know how many years now, but in the sense that, okay, this is a broadcast from a, you know, professional production team. They are handing it to me. I have to set up a virtual camera to, you know, follow around these players and create a storyline that makes sense. And it has to be hype and all these other factors. It's so much more involved than the standard case of a, you know, a YouTube video editor. So I wanted to get as many experiences possible across the editing ecosystem, so to speak. And I thought that your firsthand experiences were such an interesting case. I had to have you on. So I really, really was fascinated when you reached out and you said, hey, I listened to the podcast. I was like, what? You listen to this crummy old thing? That's awesome.
Nah,
Okay.
I really enjoy what I listen to. And I appreciate you having me on. Just to clarify really quick,
Sure.
in terms of like worrying about that macro view, that's not like always my job. Like when it comes to like anything I do on my like own YouTube or any like pet projects that I do for Owl that are like I'm the one like producing them. Yeah. But when it comes to like I'm capturing something for another editor, one of the things that improved me a lot last year is when I was working on Contenders, I was used to basically being mostly a one-man band. Like Jay, the broadcast director, he also does some sound stuff with me, and he helps me a lot. Like you wouldn't believe. Like he like EQs like all of the caster voice lines on the Contenders videos.
Oh, awesome.
And he's great at that stuff. He's like an audio engineer, like by trade, I think. Like. So
bless
like
audio
he's
engineers.
great at that
my
stuff,
God.
and he actually taught me a lot. Like a lot of what I learned about audio wasn't from film school; it was from Jay, and he's great. At
That's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah. So, but in regards to Owl, one of the things that helped me a lot in terms of improving as a capture artist would be like if a producer says we're doing a like now arriving Icon Wall, which is like the series where we explore like maps and like iconic plays on like maps that we did last year. Like it doesn't matter like what I want to do. Like we're doing Icon Wall. Like we're doing big plays that everyone remembers from Icon Wall. Like it doesn't matter what I want to do, and that's the way it should be, right?
Right.
So
right.
for me, it was like a big learning curve that was like really nice to have to go through because it made me a lot more flexible in general. It's just being, here's the play, you shoot it and make it look good, and we'll figure it out. Okay.
Mhm.
So it sometimes like you just have to deal with things like, oh, Torbjorn is walking at a wall and he's gonna clip, and like you have to frame it so he doesn't look like he's clipping,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise the game doesn't look good. So
Right.
like these are the problems where I just had to learn how to deal with them, and they were great because once it got to things where I could be like either self-producing or things where it was like more frag movie-esque, like we did show opens last year, which were like game capture focused hype reels. They were like a minute long before every major tournament. It would be like, oh, there's these shots that I never knew that I could do, but because I was put out of my comfort zone, I had to do them.
You were pushed to
Like
do them, right?
I knew I could do them and I knew I could make them look good. So then when it came to watching the broadcast and like figuring out like having more open season, like I don't, like we just need to get stuff that looks good, but it can be from anything, and being able to sort of have a much more expanded repertoire of like possible things I could do was really helpful. But that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't forced out of my comfort zone and to do like specific things, because that's what a video needs, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. No, I was so engulfed in what you were saying. I apologize. Obviously, with your macro view on your work and the production things that you do and stuff like that, that was something that really came into form when you were with Overwatch League, and it's probably something that you've I don't want to jump and say perfected, because it's always a learning process, right? But
Yeah,
you've
yeah, for
certainly got
sure.
a bigger grip on it now than you did, let's say, back when you were doing your film production classes and stuff like that. What kind of edits were you doing in your personal time outside of university during that time, 2020, 2021, if any?
So, a few things to this question. Number
Sure.
one, fuck all. Before contenders, I was not editing a whole lot of side. I think I did like Genji one trick like montages that I would be like bored, so I'd like 2 hours and just like slam a ton of clips. They like clip dumps,
Okay.
like you sometimes
Sure,
you see like pro
sure.
players do clip, like that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
not like editing that was like seriously like, oh, I'm gonna like make this nice. It was just
Nothing to
like,
write home
oh,
about.
I
Yeah.
know Premiere, I can throw things together, whatever, you know. In terms of like collaboration and things like that, it's actually kind of weird. For me, when the weirdest thing is when I first started working at Owl, most of the muscles that I actually used like were actually the ones that came from film school, because when I was working in contenders and when I was like just learning and like trying to grind my way up through like tier 2.5, tier 2, that kind of stuff,
Mhm, mhm.
like you do everything on your own. Like I'm sure you notice as like when you're doing like Twitch highlights and like YouTube stuff and like independent stuff, you do everything, or like most things, like
Right,
even like
sure.
90% like is a lot, right? But when I went to Owl, it was not culture shock, but it was like very familiar, because like film school, all of a sudden I was going back to, this is your job, you do your job well, and then someone else does the rest of it. And
Right,
it's
being
a
part of a
different
team.
feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're being part of the team, and you have to be a team player. And I enjoyed that at Owl much more than film school, but at times in film school I enjoyed it as well. And in film, like if I didn't go to film school and I just started just editing on my own, like right out of high school or something, or like let's say I didn't go into film school and I went to a different degree but then started editing, I would not have been able to collaborate nearly as well, especially when it comes back to things like project organization.
Mhm.
Like the only reason my projects were even like properly organized was because of not even film school, but that last class I was talking to you about earlier about the Avid professor who was like, why would
Oh,
you
right,
ever
right,
want to
right,
do mixed
yeah.
frame rates? She was like probably the best professor I had, but she was also like really a hard ass in a good way, like not in a bad way. She was like
Sure.
a hard ass about project organization and just beat it into us.
Right, right.
So even when I was like editing for myself, my projects would be organized to the point that if you open them, you probably would be able to figure everything out like within like 10 minutes.
Right, right.
And
I know what
that
you're
kind of
looking for.
mindset helped me when it came to Owl to a lot more so than even working on contenders, because like in terms of like game capture, I knew enough. Like I knew enough when it came to game capture, and like I was hired for game capture, but when it came to assistant editing, if I had not done film school, I would have been completely clueless, because
Okay.
like assistant editing is not about flashy cutting and stuff.
No,
It's
no,
about,
not at all.
putting yourself, it's about empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
and putting yourself in a position where you can help other people, like I was talking about earlier. So,
Right.
and also like we have great editors on Owl who were like really patient with me and like teaching me like what they needed like out of an assistant editor for their projects, and just being like also just generally flexible with any ideas I had, especially when it came to game capture. Like they kind of let me spread my wings in that direction, whereas when it came to assistant editing, they like made sure I was like on the right track and pulling the right things and getting them set up in the right way.
That
So
makes
like
sense.
once
Yeah.
I got up to speed, like I could be good at eight.
Right. Optimal.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's fantastic that you had, right out of the gate, a really good system set up for success, I guess is the way that people would phrase it. Obviously, Overwatch is like, out of all the mini games in its genre, like arguably the most visually cluttered of them all, right? Terms of like, what goes on in a 6v6 fight, ultimates going off, shields
especially as like
out.
an esport.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like as an esport spectator. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. How does that come into play when you're trying to optimize viewers' understanding of what you're showcasing? Like, is there a rule of thumb that you try and follow for busy scenes? Like, I can imagine getting various angles and showcasing every interesting interaction in a team fight is a lot,
So it actually, for me, it's actually, so this is actually part of why I'm passionate about the replay viewer and game capture in general. It's because Overwatch is a cluttered game to spectate. I think the replay viewer is great because it lets you focus in on the things that are important and remove the things that are not, because you have the benefit of hindsight. Because like a lot of the things, the decisions that as an observer you have to make are because Overwatch is a cluttered game. You don't know what the fuck is going to happen. Right. You have to have a fucking giant FOV and be able to see everything and be really far out. But then everyone's small, and it's hard to focus on individual things because you have to be able to see everything, because what if you miss something? But in the replay viewer, you don't have that problem because you know everything that happens, or at least if you've watched it and you have it logged, you know everything that happens. Right. So you know the things that are important, so you can kind of punch in and focus on things. So actually, I think the visual clutter, if anything, it at times it's caused problems, like Moira's orbs will like freeze and then you have to reset the replay viewer. Like bugs like that will be like problematic at times. But in terms of like, does the visual clutter like make it harder for me? Not really. Like if anything, it's more of like a benefit to me, because I'm like it adds value to the medium, for me at least, because it's like,
what you need to filter
the regular game is cluttered, but this is a way it can not be cluttered. For me. Right. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
It does. Yeah. Do you think that the move to 5v5 eventually in Overwatch 2 will help alleviate a bit of that complexity that comes with like capturing hectic gameplay, or, because it's kind of leans into your benefit, do you think it might take away?
No, I don't think it'll take away. I don't know how much I can actually answer.
Sure, that's fine.
But I don't think it'll take away. I think it's a neutral thing, and I think at the end of the day, the spectator Overwatch League gameplay product is like the marquee thing. So I think anything that benefits that product benefits me. I don't think that visual clutter hurts me, and I think it may even add some slight value. But I think any value that's lost is fine if the main product is better, because then I'll have more hype moments and just better storylines, and that'll more than make up for it. Because for me, like the game capture and the cinematography and all that stuff exists to service like the main league storylines and products. Right. So like even if there's like sacrifices along the way, as long as like the storyline itself is better, I could care less.
Yeah, no, absolutely. On the similar note, and of course, without treading over any NDAs you might have or anything like that, can you share what it was like working with a proprietary system like Blizzard uses, like MAM? How does it compare to gathering film material in more traditional ways that you're used to?
Kind of weird, because like, how did I say this? The MAM is the only MAM I've ever used. So I don't have a reference point to compare it with anything. Like if you were to compare it to like YouTube VOD clipping, it is very different.
Sure.
Or like dumping cards from like physical cameras, it's also very different.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant, I guess. Yeah.
There's like basically no overlap in between. Not to get too specific, but like you can kind of think of the MAM as like a really fancy Twitch clipping system. That's really what it is.
Okay.
So it's not like there is a learning curve to it, but it's not like rocket science, and there's really no analog to the MAM other than the MAM. Like it's
okay.
So I can't really talk a ton about it without being like the MAM is like the MAM.
No, you're totally fine. And for those that have no idea what the hell the MAM is, it's basically a media asset management system. So
yeah, and most like post-production, like especially
that, right?
like traditional broadcast type things, like if you're working on a TV show and stuff. I mean, I don't know because I've never done any of that, but I've heard like they have MAM equivalents, or they even have things called like a MAM. So yeah, most of them just work like, I presume, like you broadcast thing, you can make clips out of it.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know what else a MAM would do.
It's a system, right? It's a system set up, made for the back end and post production teams. That's all. Yeah, I just jumped right into that, assuming everybody knew what the hell a MAM was. So I apologize. Here's a fun one for you. Now that Overwatch Contenders is returning this year with open brackets, and fingers crossed, hopefully the tier 2 LAN scene, would you ever see yourself returning to do professional work with them, or are you strictly working with OWL for now?
I don't know. I would never say never. Like I worked with like Contenders and like broadcast partners for Contenders before. And like in the off season, I mean, like I worked on Creator Cup, and that wasn't OWL. So like I would never say never. And I mean, like I don't know what the plans are with Contenders, but I mean, I think it's totally possible, for example, that if there was like an off-season event during the Overwatch League off-season for Contenders, that I would totally be down to work for it. And like, I mean, like, money talks.
Yeah, of course. It always does. Okay, well, cool. I was always just curious if you were open to that option, just because you had worked with them in the past, and I didn't know if, obviously not to belittle Contenders or anything like that, but I didn't know if once you've had a taste of, OWL production, if you would ever go back to working with
No,
Contenders.
I mean, like, I enjoy, like, to me, they're like two different flavors of ice cream.
I figured it was something like that. Yeah,
and it definitely would be dependent on like time frames and like rates, and there's a lot of considerations.
Sure.
I would never say never. I would say it's probably a little less likely than not. Like I probably wouldn't drop OWL for like Contenders like randomly at the drop of a hat. Probably not.
Yeah.
But like if the timelines lined up, I would definitely not say no.
I gotcha.
To the right rate.
Okay, cool. And do you think your home is with Overwatch for the foreseeable future? Like, does capturing within it give you fulfillment as a capture artist and an editor that, presumably you crave as a creative?
At least right now, I definitely think that's the case. More so because I've explored game capture in other games, not really for esports. I think esports, when it comes to esports, I think Overwatch is it for me. Like after Overwatch, like whenever that happens, because like, these things, nothing lasts forever. No. I think in a few years, like if I wanted to move in a different game capture direction, I definitely think it would be more in the vein of like a developer side game capture or like agency side game capture, more so than esports. I would not hesitate to say never though, because like if like Valorant released a replay viewer that was like really great, I'll probably dabble into it, but I don't know if that really strikes my fancy.
Speaks
and
to
also,
you, yeah.
I don't know if in 6 years, like or so, game capture will even be the thing that I'm like super into. It probably will be, but like there have been times where I've enjoyed doing producing. Like for Creator Cup, I met with like all the talent like Lemon Kiwi, like Dave, Vicky Kiki, and Curix, and we did voiceover sections, and I wrote scripts and stuff like that. And I really enjoy doing stuff like that. That's like one of the few times that I use my screenwriting minor. So I take I think I've used my screenwriting minor like 6 times since I've graduated total, in like 2 years.
Sure.
And every time I get that one chance, I'm like, oh yes, I enjoyed this.
This is why. Yeah.
This is why I got that minor and took an extra semester of college for no reason other than this.
Other than this, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty flexible. I don't want to get the rug pulled out from under me, but I always figured like I'll enjoy something, and if I enjoy that thing, I'll probably want to find a job that involves it. So I'm pretty chill in that regard. I'm kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question perfectly, and which also happens to be my last question for you today. Do you have a grander aspiration beyond capture art and editing, or are you comfortable nesting until things feel like they naturally evolve? And I feel like you kind of already answered that honestly in your last question.
Yes and no. In terms of like natural, I am comfortable with letting things naturally evolve, but I think in terms of Overwatch, the thing that I enjoy the idea of sort of shaping the way game capture is done. And with Overwatch, like so far, especially like last year, I think in years prior, obviously like I wasn't really game capturing,
Mhm.
but I think last year I probably spent more hours in the replay viewer in 2021 than maybe anyone else in the world. Knock on wood. There might be like one person, but I don't. Yeah. So for me, it's just building up the experience to sort of, because my sort of like current like pie in the sky, like super far out like
Mhm.
goal is to want to push like the Overwatch like game capture aesthetic to just move the needle on that, because I think just being able to like leave a little bit of like a lasting mark on the way game capture is done, at least in our corner of the gaming industry, would be really nice. I don't
Sure,
really know how far out that is. I'm not in a rush for that to happen.
sure, sure.
So it definitely is go with the flow, but I wouldn't say it's like I'm completely chill and letting things happen to me. Like there are
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that like I want to do, but I'm not in a rush for them to happen. Like I'm
Okay.
very much like a incremental person. Like I have
Mhm.
projects that I want to do, and I slowly build them up over time. Like I'm not really like a, oh, I need to do this now. I don't really get that impatient about things.
Right, right, right.
I actually sometimes I do, but for the most part I don't.
Okay, I gotcha. Well, oh my God, I learned so much about Overwatch Replays Viewer and what capture art is like, and tons of other things today. Michael, it was amazing hearing the insight that you had to share with me today. Thank you so much for your time.
No problem. I enjoy this a lot. I love talking. I could talk forever.
Well, maybe I'll have you on again, maybe once the season's over. That'd be pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah.
What is the best place for people to keep up with you and all your content if they're not already?
Twitter. Yeah. Twitter, I think is probably the best part. My YouTube channel is like, it's there, but it's pretty like I post pretty sporadically. So I would not say that's the best place to keep up. I would appreciate a subscription to my YouTube channel. That being said, but if you just want to like talk to me or exist or ask me questions or ask me for advice, I always love giving advice. Actually, like for me, getting started, one of the biggest things is that one of my coworkers from Owl last year actually mentored me during college. He was actually not the
Ah,
mentor I
cool.
was supposed to get because he's actually really busy. But I ended up just asking him so many questions on Reddit that he ended up kind of mentoring me anyway. Because during COVID, our theses all got canceled because you couldn't make films. So everyone got shifted over to getting mentorships from industry insiders. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this editor and capture artist from the Overwatch League, and they were like, over what? And I was like, don't worry about it. But he ended up giving me a lot of advice, and then when I joined Owl, we ended up being coworkers for a year, which was really really fucking great. So I love trying to like sort of like pass the buck. So like if anyone
Yeah,
ever has
yeah.
any advice, like questions they have about like post production or Overwatch or just
Mhm.
like
Needs advice or
working
something
in
like that.
esports in general, feel free to reach out or like hit me up on Twitter. Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully we speak again soon.
thank you.
All right, see ya.